right, welcome to another episode of Men in Marriage. Today's guest, I have the Mr. Eric Meriwether. He is a 13-year veteran in the game of marriage. He has two beautiful daughters. He is the co-founder of Rise Coalition nonprofit. He is also he also works for the Northwestern Mutual Company, financial company. Welcome.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it, man. How you doing today?
I'm doing well this morning, doing well.
Awesome.
So, as always, in this podcast here, I have three questions that I ask all of my guests. We'll go through those three questions, and then afterwards, if you have any additional discussion or conversation or questions that you may have of your own, you're more than free to open up that dialogue at that particular time. And then we'll just continue on the conversation. That sounds good?
Yeah, man. Sounds great.
All right. Sounds good. So let's go ahead and just dive right into the questions then.
Jumping right in.
So question number one. What is a man's role in marriage?
Man, so this is quite a loaded question, man. Go a lot of different ways. So when I think about the man's role, and there are a lot of different, I guess, perspectives on this. And I know thinking back even from times of our great grandparents, our parents, leading up to where we are now, I feel like there have been some shifts and some changes, maybe even in the role. I know a lot of times with a lot of couples that becomes a topic of contention, frustration, trying to really figure things out. But as it relates to, I guess, my definition, the way I view it over my years would be to lead and serve primarily as a visionary for the family. And I'm gonna come back and pinpoint on a couple of things that I said there, specifically the serve aspect. So leading and serving. Okay. And I think about the quote, "To whom much is given, much is required." Right. So there's a lot on us as men, as husbands, to give, lead, but also there's a huge requirement and expectation in a lot of cases too. And then also what I think about is being a thermostat and not a thermometer, right? A lot of the times, whether we realize it as men and husbands, we a lot of the times can set the tone and the atmosphere in the home. And then, lastly, what I really think about is our role is to be active, positively engaging, and present, right? It's not enough to just simply be present, because we can be very present in terms of being in the home, but taking it kind of a step further, the job is to protect and provide direction and leadership for our family. I feel like emotionally, physically, intellectually, and spiritually. And so I think kind of from a holistic standpoint, that encompasses the role, ultimately of what a man is in the house. And so I want to just take a quick pause and see, I guess, because I know you may have some thoughts or some comeback questions, clarifying questions on some of that.
Nah, man, hey, you dropping bombs this morning, and thermostat and not a thermometer, and being active, being a protector, leadership, spiritual, the whole gambit of information that you just went through is all great information. Some things that we know to be, and all of it is true. But I think that the reminder that you just mentioned, like everything that you just said, is a good reminder to men in general about all the different things that we are and that we should be, striving to continue to be in our marriages, especially if we have, children as well. So yeah, I definitely appreciate all of that information that you just gave.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess just to maybe elaborate a little bit on a couple of things.
Yeah.
So there's a term, and you, I know that you've heard of it, but servant leadership. Because I think a lot of the times, we view ourselves as, kings, and we throw around the term king and queen. But I think that as men of the house, and you can identify as well, because you have a daughter. I have two girls, as you mentioned. And what I often think about is I'm going to walk the line here a little bit. So as a man, we are showing or teaching our daughters how they should be treated by men, right? And so in our household, like the roles aren't always specifically clearly defined. This is what a man does, this is what a woman does. We probably don't have enough time to get into the full details and brunt of that, but it's okay for a man to wash clothes or to do dishes, right? Because typically or traditionally those were roles that we would see, that the woman takes care of the house, the man just goes out, kills the food, brings it back in,
Right.
and then the wife takes care of everything else. But I think in a day and time when a lot of times our women, our wives are just as ambitious and working and doing things outside of the home as we are. That's what I was mentioning earlier on when you first asked. There has been somewhat of a meshing or combining of the roles. And so sometimes I may cook dinner, you know what I'm saying? My wife is the one always cooking breakfast, lunch, and dinner day after day. And so definitely wanting to make sure that we're also serving our family, whatever that may look like. And especially being there as a support emotionally, because that's one of the things for me I struggled with, was like being emotional. So I had to learn how to connect with my emotions, being real with myself, and how to clearly articulate that, so that I could be more present, in the home emotionally for, my wife and my
Right.
daughters, and learn how to
Man,
communicate.
I'm still struggling with that emotional part. I'm 8 years in it and still struggling with the emotional part. And it's
Yeah,
no fault of my wife. It's just the way that I was raised.
yeah, man.
Yeah.
That's
But I
it.
also wanted to circle back on something that you hit on also about you was talking about your daughters,
Yeah,
and you want to show them how a man treats a woman. So on one way for them to see how a man treats a woman, not only the way that you treat them, but how you treat their mother.
absolutely.
So as the dynamic in the house of your ebb and flows throughout your marriage or whatever, no matter, the good or the bad, they're always constantly watching how you're interacting together.
Yeah,
So being, as you mentioned, present actively, emotionally, and all of those different things, they're seeing all of that. So you may have a bad day and you come home and you may just want to be alone for, for a few minutes or whatever. And your daughter may be looking at you, especially when they're younger, looking at you like, okay, what's wrong with dad? He doesn't want to play with me. He doesn't want to spend time with me. He may equate that later on in life, like, as a negative kind of, a negative tone. But
yeah.
if we continue to reinforce, how men should treat women and how we are treating our wives, then as they get older and find a mate themselves, then they would always look back on, okay, my dad did this for my mother. I expect my mate to do this for me as well, which
Yeah.
can be good and bad depending on how much we spoil our kids.
Right, which could be a challenge.
Yeah,
It can
absolutely.
definitely be a challenge. So one other thing too, I didn't put in here that you just kind of sparked the thought, man, was being a positive example, right, to the family. So I didn't specifically say that, but that's one of the things you're actually saying as well, especially as it relates to being present. And I've learned that. So my daughters are 12 and 9, and man, you hit the nail on the head, bro. Like they notice so many things that we don't even realize that they notice. And I think about, with all that, again, just our ancestors, parents, grandparents, or should I say grandfathers, fathers, etc., had to deal with, we thankfully don't have to deal with half of what they had to deal with in the way that they had to deal with it. So I understand and can only imagine the mental space that they were in, and the luxury, I'll say, because of the stones and foundation they laid and what they had to go through so that we could be here. And that sometimes helps me to push through being more present, but in the name of an example, also therapy, right? And I don't know, like for you, but I actually went through therapy about a year and a half ago. And that helped me so much, because we're all still evolving, right? It's a process for all of us, but like for me, the same things I was taught, the examples that were set for me were essentially emotionally dead, right? Having no emotion. Men don't cry, the same thing that we were all taught.
Right.
And so once I got to the point of being a husband, being a father, it was a lot of barriers that I had to break down, and still, again, breaking through some of those, but going through therapy and counseling really helped me a lot to connect and identify with how I truly felt and being able to articulate that and being that positive example, in the home.
Mm-hmm. I do think that is, whether you go individually or as a couple, I think I
Yeah, for
do
sure.
believe that can actually help. There was a point in time in my life where I thought like, yeah, I'll never go to a therapist. You know what I'm saying? I'll never go to a counselor unless it's, for the first initial marriage counseling. And then
Uh-huh.
we would never go back. As you mentioned earlier, we evolve and we're still evolving. So I do believe in that now. And
No doubt it helps. It's
yeah,
got to be the right one. That's what I've learned though, because I actually made attempts and spoke with multiple therapists, and even as a couple, as you mentioned, like we saw, multiple therapists, and it's easy to just kind of throw up your hands after one, like, see, it don't work like that. And you telling all these folks my business. I don't know them people, but it's like
right.
just finding with anything, right? Just finding the right one that aligns with you and that you can identify philosophically and really connect with. So that's important as well.
Absolutely. Well, nah, man. First, great question. Good answers. Anything else you want to circle back on or elaborate?
Yeah, not the only other thing I'd say is again, we've kind of spoken on, but just again, really being active. But the main thing I want to pinpoint on is being positively engaging, because you can engage, and especially from the standpoint of the way that we're communicating with our spouses, again, teaching our daughters through how we treat their mothers, things that we're saying, being mindful of how like we're engaging as men and leaders with our wives, and being affirming and giving them things that they need, right? It's law of reciprocity, giving them what they need, receiving what we need. I know some of this is gonna kind of flood over into the next question I believe that you have, or I know we'll hit on it at some point here,
Mm-hmm.
but just being mindful of how we're engaging.
No, absolutely. And yeah, so anything that we don't hit on right now, we actually can, like I said, circle back on in the
Okay.
open discussion. So if something else sparks your thought as we continue to have this conversation, we'll definitely can circle back.
Okay.
So
Sounds
we'll
good.
go on to move to question number 2, which
Okay.
is, do you believe a man's ego should be stroked from time to time?
Whew. Okay. So that's a great question. Great question. So I think it goes back to so I thought about like ego. How would we specifically define
Mhm.
that specific word, ego? Because I know some can view it as like a negative thing. So I guess if you could clarify a little bit for me, just in terms of ego.
Yeah.
Um,
So as
yeah.
I was coming up with the questions for this season, so an ego meaning that, say for example, so you're single, right?
Uh-huh.
You're dating women, it's all easy, they're blowing your head up with,
Mhm.
I'm saying, I love you, I'm saying, you treat me right, you do this, that, and the other for me, so it's making you want to continue to do those things
Yeah.
because you're hearing it.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So in marriage, like I said, there's ups and downs in both
Mhm.
sides, and I'm not taking anything away from the females, but I'm specifically talking to men.
Yeah. Specifically
So
talking to the men.
I'm talking to the men. So in your marriage, do you think that your ego, meaning that you want to hear some of these things, the thank yous, the I love yous, the you're doing such a great job, you know what I'm saying, to keep you going?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, man. So first and foremost, I'd say yes, 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 definitely yes, right? So I think it's something that we all need, but again, specifically on the man and,
Hmm.
and keeping it 100, right? We are going to get it somewhere, right? I think it's even things we got to think about. Again, it's with our spouses, right? If you're not hearing it from your spouse, then it is going to make you more susceptible and vulnerable, right, to give into when you do hear it from others. That's just my philosophy.
Hmm.
So yes, because if we don't hear it, like if we're not getting it, from them, it's going to be gotten from elsewhere. And so I think it's very, very important to get what you need from the people or the person, should I say, that is the most important to you, right? The one that you're supposed to spend the rest of your life with, to be 100% committed, dedicated to. And I think it has to be done. I'm trying to get my words together here, gather my thoughts. Because you have some situations where, again, it can be a delicate situation with just dealing with so many different people, because you have this aspect of, extreme arrogance or narcissism, where these things can be used in very manipulative type of ways.
It's true.
You know what I'm saying? And so it's such a delicate thing, but it needs to be done well-intentioned and with the right heart, and speaking to the right areas and affirming the right areas of that man to edify and lift him up and not tear him down, right? And so I think from the standpoint of uplifting your husband, the man that's the most important to you in your life, it's important to speak life into him. And so I think from that standpoint, it is absolutely necessary to do, and to also express your love, because a lot of the times, as men, being how we were talking about earlier, what we were taught, being so hardcore, being so unemotional, we may not always, and not speaking for can't speak for everyone, of course, but generally, we may not always be as expressive with telling and saying what we actually need, in the name of just being macho, right? But I think it's definitely something that is important, to uplift your man.
No, yeah, I agree. And again, this is not any knock on women. This is just men talking about men. But I agree. So you may be getting it, at home, and she's telling you all the right stuff to make you go out and deal with the day, or the world, I'd say. But then once it starts to stop or it tapers off because of whatever's going on, all of a sudden you start to hear the other noise that may have always been there, but because you're not getting it at, where you should be, all of a sudden you're like, okay, what did you say? Like you automatically hear it. So it is very, I think also, I don't want to say wise, but it is definitely something that both parties, men and women, should take heed to make sure that we're, as you mentioned earlier, in tune with your spouse, to make sure that you're giving them everything that they need at home.
Yeah. And I think about it, it really being, they say love is an action word, right? And so you may not always feel certain things, but one of the things you said is key. And I thought about it when you were asking, kind of going through in the beginning. So I'm glad you just said that. It jogged my memory. But it is very, very important to make sure that we continue to do the things that got us our spouses, right? Even for women, continue to do the things that got you your spouse, because that's what is going to keep the fire burning, keep the flame going, even when we don't feel like it. But
absolutely,
many of us, women, men, are guilty of that. You start doing one thing, and then, like I said, it tapers off. So that's where it takes that intentionality and the unconditional love and giving, treating others right, the golden rule, right? Doing unto others as you would have them do unto you. And I think we'd be all right, but you have to work at it every single day. And the affirmation needs to continue, on a daily basis as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There's thousands of temptations whenever you walk out this house, even in the house, you find stuff on TV and whatever social media apps that can draw your attention away from the one that you're supposed to, spend your rest of your life with. So all of those different things, the affirmation that you mentioned, is very, very important. And as you mentioned also earlier about evolution, as you grow, things change. So the things that you might like 10 years ago might not be the same thing you like today, but through constant communication and being active with your spouse, both of you should understand like where you are in your relationship, so that way nothing ever tapers.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I that was great information as well. I mean, you dropping bombs this morning. Anything else before we move on to the third question? On ego.
Yeah, I think so. with that, I guess ego, we have to be mindful that while it sounds crazy and it shouldn't necessarily be this way, because there are a lot of things that should be a certain way, right? And there are a lot of things that shouldn't be a certain way. But I think the reality is that from the standpoint of you mentioning when we go out that door, right? There's so many things that, and not even at the door, I mean, internet, TV, whatever it may be, media, like there is a competition going on, right? There is a competition going on with us and our spouses. And I'll say us and everyone that may be after us, or all the things, the entities, whatever you may call them, may be after us. And so I think one of the things that people, and we may not want to fully accept, but that woman that wants your husband, right, or that man that wants your wife, right, we have to be number one on the list. We have to stay on top of our A game, right? Affirming and doing our part to be what our spouse need us to be, right? Whether that's health, wealth, the affirmation, the connectedness, but always keeping that in mind. I will say that's one of the things that I do often think about, and my wife as well, right? We want to be the best, and shout out to my wife, Tim, because I know she recently started, working out and looking great, and we do that for each other, right? Because there are a lot of things you want to make sure you're looking the best, you're smelling the best, you're saying the right things when you're single, but it tapers off. And so just realizing that you want to be the best for your man, for your lady. And I think that'll keep a lot of things at bay as well, and keep it fun, keep it spicy. So that's another
absolutely. And with that as well, one of the things that I've said previously on this podcast before as well is that my personal hierarchy, of course, is God, me, spouse, kids, and then everything else. That's the way that I was raised. That's what I believe in currently wholeheartedly. Now, can anything in that hierarchy switch and flip flop? Yeah, it can from time to time, but that is my base. That's what I'm supposed to go by. I can say, when my daughter was born, I told my wife, her and my daughter's, role swapped. It was me, then my daughter, then hers. But I know that's not right. But again, like you said, everything is a competition, I guess you can say, for that number 2 spot under me.
Yeah, that's it.
So we just got to make sure that we are mindful of who's supposed to be in that number 2 spot under us, which is our wives, our spouses. You know what I'm saying? Yeah,
for sure. All right, yeah, man, that's what I got.
All right. So going to question number 3 then, and I'm gonna have to explain this one to you a little bit too. So number 3 is, do you think your spouse should be your peace? Do you think your spouse should be your peace? So it kind of goes with the ego question a little bit, and meaning that there's so much noise outside of this house. When you come back in the house, do you expect your spouse to be your peace? So let me answer the question for you a little bit first. For me, when I say I go outside of this house and I have so much things going on, and then I come back in, what I mean by peace is meaning that I want to reconnect with my wife. So I know you had a good long day. I've had a long day. I don't want us to come into the house and talk work first or talk any type of business first. I want us to reconnect first. And then we could talk about what happened in our days first. So that's what I'm talking about when I mean peace. So I don't want to come in the house and the first thing you want to talk to me about is what happened to you today, whether good or bad. I want to hear about it, but I haven't seen you all day. Let's reconnect, today about what, I'm saying, how we should interact, as husband and wife before we go through all of the other things. That's what I mean. For me, that's what it means.
Yeah, man, that's good. And I think, so the question was, should your spouse be your peace?
Right.
Yeah. So I think, number one, just as you were saying, and this may be kind of multifaceted, but I think that, your spouse should definitely be, it makes me think of like place of refuge, right? The place where you feel comfortable, you feel loved, you feel like you feel welcomed, right? If no matter what is going on in your life, whether how good or how bad, especially, you want to know that this is one person that you can just come to, talk to, and it quiets all the noise outside that's going on around you, right? But then I also think from the standpoint of, from the definition that you gave, um, we should fight to stay connected with our spouses continuously, right? For there to be no gaps. And also, what I hear you saying is just, right, communication, like having communication and being connected. So many times we can be, and I just speak, generally over the time, and everybody at some point usually goes through this. If you're married for longer than 5, 10 years, right, there comes a point in time, just through the monotony of life, where you become, at some point, whether it's a very brief period of time due to school, job, business, etc., kids, or whether it's an extended period of time, there comes a time where you're like two ships passing in the night, right? Which isn't good,
Right.
because that's where the vision and all the things we're talking about earlier, right? Those outside forces and influences can tend to get in. And so it's our job to be intentional, just with everything else in marriage, right? It's our job to be intentional every single day to connect. And like, even for us, like during the day, just random check-ins, right? Had a quick break, just calling to see how things are doing. Just want to let you know I love you. Just things that where you're checking in. And so sometimes we may have talked with one another a couple of times throughout the day, right? And so we remain connected, not just once we get off and come to the crib, but we've talked, right, maybe earlier this morning, we've
Right.
talked in the noon. So just making it a point to be intentional. And then I want to speak to another aspect of it. I interpret it similarly, but a little bit of a variance. And so when I think about peace, and I've heard this now, use an example of Will Smith and Jada
Yeah.
Pinkett, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that they always say is, within themselves, your spouse cannot make you happy, right? No one can
That,
give you peace,
that's
right?
right.
Peace
Right.
comes from, God above. I think it's a, verse that says, now may the Lord of peace, now may the Lord of peace at all times in every way, be your peace, right? Let the Lord be with you all. And even for himself is our peace, right? God is our peace. We have to find that quiet place, right, where we can quiet out the noise, even outside of our spouses, right? We have to make sure that we are, which again, I do a terrible job of, I'm getting better. And I know a lot of other men do as well. Like, we don't spend enough time really focusing on ourselves, what we like, right? And finding our peace, our quiet place, and having a day, right, just to ourselves, or a couple of hours to ourselves, and pouring in to ourselves to refill that cup so that we can give to others. I know for me, for years, I've had an issue with putting everybody else first, especially my family, but neglecting myself. And so not being, fully at peace, or slowing down long enough to make sure that I'm whole to give, to others, the family, et cetera. And so with all of that said, I think it's our job as individuals to do what we need to do to be, as you mentioned, to be connected with that source, right? That number
Right.
one, God.
Right.
It's our job to make sure that we have that connection, to be of sound mind, have that peace. And then I do feel that it is beneficial, and our spouses should help us to maintain that peace, right, with one another. And so from that standpoint, being the people that, with that one person, again, of refuge that you can pray with, that you can connect with here on earth, because while there is a God and we have a spiritual man, spiritual aspect, sometimes you just need something to hold on to. You need that tangible thing, and so a lot of times, again, our spouses are that number two that can help us to hold, maintain, and sustain that peace, which passes on to our children,
Right.
which flows through the household out to others in the community.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, again, with children, they see everything. So you got to be mindful of what's going on in the house, because
Yeah.
you don't want that to trickle over into any thought process, I guess you could say, that they may potentially have.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
No, but that's an interesting take that you had on that question. And I hear what you're saying exactly. And I agree to the point that you mentioned, that nobody can make you happy other than, what I'm saying, the one above, and then also yourself. I believe that you shouldn't be looking at your wife to be, to make you happy. I said this once before also, is that, you were happy when you were single. You were happy when you got engaged. You were happy when you got married. You should be happy as you continue to be married.
Yeah.
You were happy before all of this. So why not continue to stay happy? Because you was making yourself happy with whatever decisions that you were making.
Yeah. Yeah. That's real. It's
Yeah.
real. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think just, yeah, that really hits the nail, each nail on the head. But what I'm going to say is that depending on the situation, because two becoming one, right? Two becoming one flesh. What happens a lot of the time is people can have that happiness. And again, I think many people go through it, but it's things like this we don't really talk through.
Mm-hmm.
People are happy, they're at peace, quote unquote, within themselves, but then someone else comes into the picture and it disrupts that, right? And I think
Right.
that's where what you're talking about when you say it, just again, that connecting, right? So connecting, truly understanding one another, understanding what makes the other person happy, because joy can be taken, right? You can be miserable in a situation where you were prior happy. And so I think it is our job, again, just as I mentioned, to maintain that. It's the spouse's job to help to maintain that peace and truly become one flesh, so that we're aligning and moving in the same direction together. Again, man, this conversation can go on for hours. I feel like, even from the standpoint of kids coming into the picture, right? How you've been raised, how she's been raised, and really coming to an agreement on how we're going to raise our children, right? Philosophies on cleaning, philosophies just on maintaining the house, right? Philosophies on how are we going to work, operate business, community involvements, et cetera. And so it's really difficult, obviously, because if it wasn't, everybody would stay together and everybody would be happily ever after. But it's very important that, finding that peace and the balance and how
Absolutely. It's definitely essential to find that peace and balance, because again, going back to what we were saying, people change, people, evolve. What you didn't like 10 years ago might be different, but you got to make sure that you staying on top of it to make sure that you are meeting all the wants and needs of your spouse, what I'm saying, vice versa.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So that question actually can be interpreted thousands, what I'm saying, hundreds of ways. And the way that I interpreted it and the way that you interpreted it is not wrong. It's just the way that we interpreted it. So but I definitely appreciate the answer that you gave.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So yeah, those were the first three questions. I definitely appreciate you, what I'm saying, giving your insight on those three questions. I think that we're at a point now where we can open up the discussion. So if you have any questions that you want to pose to me, or you want to circle back on one of the other three questions that you have, or anything else that you know what I'm saying, that's coming to mind, we want to go ahead and give you that space to do so now.
Okay. I think I do have a question that actually just came to me.
Yeah.
So in doing these men and marriage podcasts, which again are great, by the way, it's much needed discussion that needs to be had and heard on a much wider scale. But from these conversations, are there any themes that you are hearing in terms of major challenges that men are having within their marriages, or concerns, and then how they're being addressed? So just curious, are there any themes that you hear, like problems, solutions?
So not specifically on this podcast. So those conversations are held in, saying, behind closed doors. Which sparked the reason for this podcast actually is because we'll get together, whether it be a one-on-one or in a group setting, and we'll, I don't know what women think men talk about, but when when men get together, we 9 times out of 10 are talking about marriage.
Right. Yeah, man.
It's about, hey, we're not going into details about what's going on, but we may say, hey, I'm going through some stuff. Has anybody had this situation pop up? Or, we embellish a little bit, or we may leave out certain details, but pretty much we're talking about marriage. And in those conversations, that's what prompted this, is because one of the things that were taught to me or told to me whenever I got married, was getting married, was, hey, I hear you getting married. Yeah, I'm getting married. I'm excited about it, but then they'll come around and say, are you sure? Marriage is hard work, but they never said what the hard work was. So they wanted you to live through what they lived through, which was the ups and downs of, marriage. And so I wanted to give a platform to where people who were thinking about getting married, people who are already married, or people may be going through the ups and downs, a remembrance of why they actually got married. So, but back to your question, yes, there are trends and similarities to all of the guys that I've had conversations with. And it's mainly, hey, when I met my spouse, we were doing X, Y, and Z. Then we got married, and then X, Y, and Z stopped.
Yeah.
What did you do to make sure that, we got back to the X, Y, and Z, whatever that was? And then the conversation would just flow from there. Does that make sense? Yeah,
man. I can see, even with some things we discussed today, these are obviously things that, again, come up. And so just kind of see where you derive some of the questions here. And again, these are really good topics, man, that more people need to be talking about. Because I just hate the divorce rate, of course, seems to be up. It's so many people around us that are going through it.
Yes, absolutely.
Man.
And I hate that for the people that we know personally. And as we know, like you said, the divorce rate is up all over the place, and we're trying to figure out, like, hey, what's going on? Why are people getting divorced? And one of the reasons is because, hey, what attracted me to my spouse is no longer happening. And how can I have a conversation that will not hurt their feelings or make them feel like they're not, pleasing me in such a way that we need to, like, go our separate ways? But how can I honestly, speak to them in a way to not hurt their heart?
Yeah.
And last season 1, I had a gentleman on here now, Xavier Darden. I think Xavier. And in his conversation, I think that the way that he approached that was very, very profound. And it was profound to me because I never thought about it. And what he said was that, hey, whenever you sit down and you have those conversations, the first thing that you should probably say, or what he says, is that, hey, when you did ABC, it made me feel this way. And I don't want to feel this way. So then they'll have a conversation from there. And I was like, wow, like the light bulb went off for me when he said that. I was like, gosh, why haven't I thought about that?
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, man. So I guess in terms of other, I do have one, I guess you could say, like, kind of thoughts may be helpful here. So, and it's kind of to that point, I think very often, and you hear it often, we listen to respond, right? Especially when it gets to the point of arguing and kind of going back and forth about various things that may come up. But I don't want to miss this opportunity because, again, just a lot of people I've been talking to, and from the standpoint of stroking egos and our specific roles and even holding peace. And this is where, and I think all that therapy is they're master communicators. So I feel like they teach us how to effectively communicate with one another. But one of the things that spouses always do, and even understanding why us as men, right, need the ego stroking or whatever it may be, it always usually goes back to the past, how we were raised, what specific things that we've all been through. And when you meet with the therapist, they often go back to asking questions about, childhood. It always goes back to that in some relationship or some facet of that. And so really just understanding like how we got to where we are, and then how we deal with the individuals that are with us right in front of us, right? And then just like you mentioned that X reference, right? When you said this is how that made me feel. And and even in those cases, those are called, depending on the severity of it, triggers, right? So it's important to understand and know what those specific triggers are. And just like the words that we need that boost us up, there's certain words, sometimes 1 or 2 words that can be said that tear us down, right? And that's on both sides. So I think it's very, very important to just be mindful of listening and hearing our spouses and things that they tell us or we tell them, that they take it to heart, and then do something with that information to change the way that the approach or the words are given, so that we're effectively communicating and not missing each other, right?
Yeah, actively listening. It sounds cliche, and I say this a lot also, or people say this a lot also, is that communication. It can fix a lot of different things in your marriages. Is like you just mentioned, like those trigger words, whether it's be to, boost up or to tear down, all of that can be remedied if the other person know what your triggers are.
Yeah, that's it.
But 9 times out of 10, you probably never had that discussion.
Yeah.
So those, and then even when you have the marital counseling, when you first get married, it's very surface level,
very high level.
And it can go so much deeper, or it can go deeper, but it's only one-sided, meaning you can go deeper into one of the spouses' background, depending on how traumatic they've had a background, what happened.
Yeah, for sure.
I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
But definitely communication is definitely key. It is. It's just that you can't fault me for not knowing something about you that you never disclosed to me.
Yeah. Can't read minds, man.
I can't read minds. I would love to, but I can't.
Yeah. No doubt.
So anything else? Any other questions or discussion topics that you want to run back through? I was trying to go back through my notes of what I was trying to take notes as you were speaking.
Okay.
The only thing that I wanted to get your take on was what you said in the beginning, when it goes to thermostat versus thermometer.
Yeah.
And how I interpret that.
Okay.
And you correct me if I'm wrong in your interpretation. So I've heard that phrase before, and I want to say that how I interpret it is a thermostat turns the temperature up and down. A thermometer just tells you the temperature.
Yeah.
So in relationship to husband and wives, if my wife is the thermometer and I'm trying to read her temperature, whether it's up or down meaning she's having a bad day, up meaning she's having a good day.
Yeah.
I'm trying to read that. So if I see that, body language and everything shows that she's having a bad day, I'm going to respond by trying to turn the thermostat to try to compensate for whatever it is that she's going through, and vice versa whenever she's hot and cold, up and down. Is that similar to, I guess, what you were meaning?
Yeah, man, absolutely. And I think about yes, that was perfect, man. Perfect analogy, perfect scenario. I also think about this. So just from the standpoint of being a protector provider, right? And you've been married for a good amount of time as well. And for instance, it could be something going on, right, financially, right? We'll just say financially, as one example. And maybe your wife is concerned, worried, and maybe on the inside you are as well, right? And how we respond to that, the level of confidence, the level of affirmation that we're able to provide and give can adjust them. Like, okay, because they're looking to us as the leaders. Okay, well, he's fine. Okay, he says we're going to be okay. Things are taken care of. And just in that instance, right, the mood can change, the anxiety, all that can change and go away. And we
Right.
carry a lot, not just from the standpoint of, financially, but also fear, right? If there's a situation where there's danger, whether it's regarding a dog, whether it's regarding a man, someone breaking in, whatever that danger may be, they're going to look to us for comfort. And so by us simply being present and having confidence in those situations, right, we control the mood and how they feel, right, because of the surety and faith that they have in us. And so those are just all examples of how men, a lot of times we can set the tones, even in arguments, or if there's something that is a frustration, she could be mad, right? Not sad, but could even be mad. And depending on how we respond in that, can bring her down or take her higher, right? So there are a lot of different ways as men, a big responsibility that we have for the family. Same with our daughters. They could be sad, they could be down, but by simple words of affirmation, it could lift their spirits.
Mm-hmm. No, good stuff. I don't want to take up too much of your time if you got to go or anything like that.
I'm good, brother. I'm on your time. I know we had 45-hour designated, but I'm good, man.
The reason why I said that, because I had something that you said sparked something else, and I wanted to ask you about.
Yeah.
So what you just mentioned was our spouses look to us for comfort in times of danger. Mm-hmm. And not necessarily also, in times of danger, but just period.
Yeah.
So my question to you was in regards to times of danger specifically. So in times of danger, whether it be breaking in, like you said, the dog, or somebody, cat calls her in front of us or something like that, mm-hmm. They're looking for us to step up and be the men to respond in some type of a way to that threat. Do you have a challenge, or do you think men have a challenge in responding to those threats? Like, some men are timid, some men are natural protectors, some men are very aggressive. But generally speaking, do you think men have an issue with responding to those threats?
Man, that's deep. I think it goes back to the word that just comes to mind is, when it comes to our lives, our professions, our families, kids, spouses, especially, it takes courage, right? Mm-hmm. It takes us being strong and courageous. And generally men are, a part of I think that is part of the role. The role of a man, generally is to be strong and courageous. And I think that for, your general alpha male, someone that is more of a domineering type, it's not a challenge. But I think that there are some, because we're all made and created differently for whatever reasons, that may be more timid, that may be more passive. It is and can be a challenge depending on the nature of the situation. Mm-hmm. And I know, even just, personally, from personal, relations, it just, again, you as well, we know so many people, and it can cause issues and problems in a marriage and relationship when the woman does not feel comforted or protected or secure with her husband, right, given various situations. And so I guess the question from there, for the men that, do have challenges with it, how does one overcome and deal, with those challenges? Because that can be a big deal. It's right. A really big thing if your wife does not feel comforted and protected when she is with you, because it leaves her susceptible to, again, a number of things and situations, and other men, if you will.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not to say that men are scared per se, I guess you can say per se, but right. There's a lot that comes with being a man. There's a lot that comes with being a woman, but they're different, but they're both equally relevant, if I can say that.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense.
Yeah, there's a lot of responsibilities that are put on men that I don't think that women understand, and there's a lot of responsibilities that we put on women that we don't understand. But it just seems, because women are women, that they get the brunt of the attention. They, something happens, everybody's trying to see how's the woman doing. Nobody comes to see how the man is doing, and except for other men. you know. So the reason why I brought that question up, because what you said about, they look to you for comfort, and I was just something I don't see a lot of that being an issue in people that I've talked to, but I can see it being an issue with some men who may be a little bit passive. Their spouse may have wanted somebody a little bit more assertive, and because I see over the years that you're more and more passive, it's a turnoff, and now it's a deal breaker. But I didn't know that when we first got married.
And I think that's where, so communication within the four walls of the marriage is one thing. I feel like many don't do as good of a job as they should with communicating before and truly getting to know people. I've had some conversations, I've been surprised, like people dating and things are getting serious, and you ask them a few questions about, the individual, and it's so much they just don't know. So I don't know. We hadn't really talked about that. It's just primarily about physical and sex. But I think it's very, very important that we communicate and try to get to know, our spouse as much as possible before moving into that, the engagement as well as being married.
Yeah, absolutely. That the sex and the physical, that's all, the tip of the iceberg. You got so much underneath the water that we never touch until you get married.
Right. It's important to know what you're getting into. You need to know who you're getting into bed with, but you need to know who you're locking it in for life with.
That's right. Absolutely. So again, I appreciate you for coming on and spending some time with me, having this conversation, running through the 3 questions, and also the open dialogue that we just had, and just giving your take on and the wisdom that you're giving from 13 years of marriage. So the last thing that I want to ask is, how are you to keeping your 13 years, going on 14 years of marriage, tight?
Yeah, man. A few quick things. So it'll be 14 years, man, in August. So a couple of months here, we're coming up on 14, like 15 and a half, almost 16 together. So a lot of things that we talked about, I try to practice what I preach. So just making sure that there's open dialogue and communication daily, daily check-ins, right? We try to go, never go from morning to evening without talking, right? Sometimes you got a lot going on during the day and you're busy, but making sure that the communication lines are open. Date nights, date days, right? How many times are we being spontaneous? Again, unless your spouse works, 30, 40 miles out away, just go to lunch, at least once, or, once every couple of months, whenever you can get it in, just during the day, right? Just do some things spontaneous. Also, just making sure that you have date nights, right? So we have this thing where, for those, and this has been amazing, like my brother-in-law and sister live here, they have 2 kids. And so we get at least, and I'll break into this again, but at least once to twice a month, we switch kids with them. So they'll take our 2 for a weekend, and then the following weekend, we'll take their 2, they take our 2, right? We'll do that in consecutive weekends, and so they get a whole weekend to themselves, 1 to 2 a month, and then we get 1,
right?
Because it's very important to make sure that you continue to date one another. And then so both of our daughters are in dance, right? We have competitive dance, and so our daughters have dance practice a couple of days a week, and so those are me and my wife's date nights. We're very intentional with making sure that we continue to date one another, because one of the worst things you can do is pour into 100% your children, and then they get 18, 19, now they're off, and you're looking at each other like,
absolutely,
who are you? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so those are things, just being intentional, man. That's all the best advice I can give, being intentional, listening, truly understanding your spouse, their perspectives. Is one of the hardest things to do, is putting yourself in someone else's shoes, and not standing in their shoes as yourself, but actually trying to get outside of yourself and stand in their shoes and hear and see things from the perspective that they're giving you, not your own, right? And then responding and communicating from that place. And that's something I feel like, I know for me, has taken years and years to do. And I didn't hit that point until after a decade, right? It's just so, and then understanding is the last thing I'll say. So understanding that and you stated this earlier, your spouse is not the same person you married, right? If you're 2 years in, 5 years, 10 years in, that is one of the most, I'll just say, like, ignorant statements to say, well, you're not the same person you were when I married you. Of course not.
Right.
No one's the same person that they were 5, 10 years. And so just evolving and understanding that it's important to understand and walk with your spouse through each stage of life, and give grace to yourself as well as your spouse. And just be intentional every single day. And then last point, I met with some of my clients that have been married for over 27, 28 years. And I was basically saying, oh, that's amazing, that's awesome. And like, oh, you are like, what's the secret? And they were saying like, hey, it could be over next year. He could run off with somebody he worked with, and it just kind of put things in perspective, because I've seen people married 20, 30 plus years and divorced. Yep. So just never getting too comfortable or thinking that we've arrived, we've made it, we've got it figured out. It's a day by day thing. You have to wake up every single day and realize that to make this marriage work, I have to give 100%. She has to give 100%, right? It's 100 and 100, not 50-50.
Right. Yeah, no, 100%. No, I appreciate that insight on your 14 years. I say that also about the waking up daily. Everything's a choice. Like I choose to come home. I choose to go to work. I choose to do the things I'm supposed to be doing, because those are choices that I personally made and committed to myself that I will do.
Yeah, for sure. Sure.
Again, thank you for coming on. What I want to do now is just give you a little bit more time to let people know how they can reach out to you, whether it be social media, your work, the nonprofit, whatever you want to say, so that way people will know how to get in contact with you if they need to. Okay,
yeah, for sure. So first and foremost, man, I just want to thank you for the honor and opportunity of coming on the show today, man, and talking about this very, very much needed topic. And appreciate you, brother.
Yeah.
In terms of contacting me, I'm on Facebook, Eric Meriwether, Eric L. Meriwether. My business page, financial advisor, Eric L. Meriwether, financial advisor, on Facebook as well. I'm on LinkedIn. We've got _Eric_Meriwether on Instagram. And then our nonprofit organization page, RISE Coalition, Rutherford Inclusivity Service and Empowerment Coalition, is RutherfordRISE.org. You can find us there. And then also on Instagram, Rutherford Rise.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Again, thank you for coming on. I know we went over a little bit in time, but I appreciate you for staying on with me. And I hope anybody who's watching or listening to this podcast grab anything from what this discussion was talking about today. And like you said, I think it is a much needed conversation that is needed to be had. I think people and men of all races and creeds are having these conversations within our own circles, but to get it out into the masses, I think is a greater good. So again, my name is Lamar Dixon. This is Men in Marriage. I thank my guest today, Mr. Eric, for coming on, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
All right.